Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing the new Danny Boyle film, 28 Years Later, this sequel to 28 Days Later. For those of you who haven't listened to it, actually, as a matter of fact, this episode's been picking up traction later in the week, probably because the movie's coming out. But just last week, Darren and I, who will be joining me again, we covered the 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later films. We probably have many things to say about this film, which I had very complicated reaction to, and of course had a lot of anticipation for, and can't wait to hear Darren's opinion. But quickly, some show notes. Things are going to get more regular now with some new shows coming on the agenda. But of course, this week, multiple episodes about the final season of The Bear. I'll be watching the 10-episode final season this week. And as I have done for the previous seasons, I should say, I'll be breaking down those 10 episodes and then having a follow-up conversation with Sona and possibly follow-up conversation with Darren as well. Darren, have you caught up on last season of The Bear?
I'm midway. So yeah,
Okay,
we watched an
good.
episode last night. So yeah, I'm not sure how I'm feeling it, but
Okay.
yeah, we're getting there.
A little bit of a Rorschach test here, briefly, because we probably have many things to talk about here. But the first episode of the previous season, is that a great episode for you or a missed opportunity for you? What did you think?
Excellent episode. That's
Okay.
probably my favorite so far. Yeah, that opening
Yeah.
episode where it's just a giant montage and music by
Nine Inch Nails.
Trent
Yeah.
Reznor, and
Mhm.
yeah, incredible. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I think that's really kind of the dividing line for the season. I agree. The middle kind of sags a little bit. There's an episode, I think maybe probably the next one you'll see, which is the best episode the show has ever produced. So you have something to look forward to. But it's an uneven season. But I am very curious about that because I think that's the dividing line. Some people that I know did not like that first episode. And I'm like, well, if you're not vibing there, you're probably not going to get anything out of this season, more or less. But I love that first episode because I just like that. For me, it's like kind of getting lost in doing something and basically showing and not telling how this becomes like a healing thing for Carmy, but also where he funnels his OCD tendencies as well. So there's the negativity of that. But once again, just being in his mindset was pretty amazing hour of TV.
Yeah, incredible.
So yes, The Bear, the final season this week. So multiple episodes related to that. And then Darren, I think we will commit, or I'm committing at this point. Darren, feel free to join me along on this ride.
Mm-hmm.
The 7 weeks of Smoke, which is premiering this week as well.
Okay, yep. Taron Egerton, yep. I like him, and I like the girl that he's opposite, Jussie Smollett or someone like
Yes.
that. Yeah, I like the trailer. I'm not sure if it gave too much away, but I think that's the whole idea of the thing. And yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll see how far. I mean, we might quit on this one too, but we will see. We'll see how it goes. We will be coming back for the finale of Murderbot along the way as well. And I will probably have a conversation with my sister about the final season of Squid Game, which is also coming back this week. So a very busy week, all that to come in
Great.
the next week or two. So stay tuned.
I miss your sister. I haven't heard her for a while, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, well, I was talking to her last week about having that conversation. So bring her back on and maybe bring her in as these new shows come on board. I'll probably need somebody to watch them with. So, okay, so let's get into 28 years later, walking out of the theater. I don't want to spoil my full reaction here. And by the way, I don't know if you saw my review on Letterboxd.
No, I
oh,
haven't.
you did? Okay. Somewhat facetious there if anybody has seen it because I dubbed it down intentionally. So we'll get into that as well. But I had a pretty mixed reaction walking out. I was what I would say. And in general, very ambitious. Not at all the movie I was expecting to see for sure. But I don't know if this is a good movie or not. And I'm not saying that in a facetious way. Like, I literally am on the fence as to whether the film achieved what it was trying to do or not. So, my question to you, Darren, is how did you land on this?
Mixed is probably a good word for it. I really, I still think it was a very good experience to see in a
Yeah.
cinema. The callbacks to 28 Days were incredible. The opening was amazing. The whole world that they created years later really fit, I thought, in the first trilogy. The new characters were amazing. The boy, I mean, I feel
Yeah.
like this is his first acting job. He held the movie. He could run a movie. He's incredible. The new characters, the new evil characters, yeah, okay. But then it shifts when it starts shifting. For me, it felt like it was finishing a first trilogy and then
Yeah.
launching a new trilogy. And there were a few choices in the story which just took me out of the film,
Yes.
which wasn't fantastic because I was right in it up to that point and I was feeling the story, and then it just kind of it made me question some choices that they were doing, which I didn't like being out of the film. I wanted to be in there
Yeah.
for the whole way. Yeah,
Yes.
if you know what I
Agreed.
mean.
Agreed.
Yeah, yeah. So mix is probably a good idea, but I still think it's an excellent film, and it's a great film to see in the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an experience to see. And I was, to be totally honest, I was very negative on the film as I walked out. Not that I didn't appreciate many things about it, but I just had my gut reaction, especially, we'll get to the final scene, but especially after the final scene, I was really out on the film. It was like I was trying to feel myself out as I was watching it. Like, where am I landing on this? And then I had a very negative reaction to the final moments. My reaction is cooled now, so I can the things I appreciated about it have kind of risen to the top, and the things that really bothered me in the moment don't bother me as much now in my recollection. But it might be a different experience to watch it again. They might bother me more. They might bother me less. I'm not sure. It was very bumpy as I was going through it. But I actually thought the first section, this is a very schematic film, as Alex Garland's scripts oftentimes are, and it's very much divided into three sections. You basically have, he has said overtly, this is about family. You have the father, you have the mother, and then you have some kind of transcendental figure in the section three. And these different sections worked for me at very different ways, let's say. But I think the first section, you can imagine the whole film just being structured like this, very much like, to your point, very much like 28 Days Later, a pretty simple framework for a story, and very much a coming of age story for this young man. And of course, he's going out with his dad and looking for a paternal or parental figure, learning how the world is. And he's a surrogate for us as the audience, like learning the new rules of the world. All of it works very well, very suspenseful. And some of the visuals here are truly remarkable. And for me, the first section of the film worked very well, except for, let's get into it a little bit because I have so many questions for you. First of all, the opening scene, the two scenes that bother me the most, honestly, are the opening scene and the closing scene, which turns out is the framing device for the sequels. We can talk about what we think the sequel might be when we get to the end. It was like a strange tone. This attack on these children, which honestly could have gotten a little harder, I would say. I mean, I don't want to actually see the kids being ripped apart, but the show, the film, I should say, seemed a little, just seemed very low budget in a way, considering they spent so much money on this movie. But just a little blood spatter on a wall and the one kid escaping. It was kind of cool seeing the mom like telling him to run away and transforming at the same time. That was pretty interesting detail. But then the whole dad is some kind of end of days evangelist, gives him this cross, and he's like under the floorboards while the dad's being attacked. This was a little melodramatic, and is a tone that the film really doesn't hit again until it gets to the very end. But I think you did like this opening sequence, right?
Look, I did, but I didn't feel like the opening sequence of the previous two films had a much harder hitting,
Yes.
especially that second film.
Yes.
Really sent you into the film really strongly. Whereas this, like you say, it was fine with the setting. I was fine with what happened, but it wasn't really thrilling me. And then seeing like the priest that was waiting for the end of days, and he was like, "Bring it on." Yeah, it didn't really hit super hard for me, I must say.
And I think there's something to that fact that it just seemed very contrived in the moment. And in a way it is, right? Because it's actually going to be, I think, thematically, this idea of how religion fits into this new society or whatever. It's really a theme we're only going to see in the next film. So it really seemed out of place. And I guess now, maybe when this trilogy is complete, it'll make a little more sense. But like at the moment, I was like, what is this? Why are we starting here? But it
Yeah.
did eventually make sense.
I did like the Teletubbies though because they were
That
super
pays off later
freaky
too.
in that time of in the early 2000s when that used to come on the television early in the morning, where it was about the time when I would was getting home from being out. It was not something you wanted to see.
That's always terrifying. I remember when they rebooted on Netflix a few years ago, and my daughter watched a few episodes, but then this is when she was very young, but then she wasn't into it, and I was just like, oh, thank God. What a nightmare if she had gotten into that.
Especially as they're using that to calm the kids down before an impending zombie attack.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware of this until after I saw the movie, but apparently the Teletubbies premiered in 97, so 28 years ago. So I guess they were looking for specific cultural iconography from 28 years ago.
Interesting.
Then we jump to 28 years later, of course, and we find this is very like folk horror, which I thought was a very interesting direction to take the like a visual style we have not seen in this series at all. But you see this kind of almost like a pagan culture that's reformed. Aaron Taylor Johnson plays the father here, and his son is Alfie Williams. I believe this is, if not his first film, one of his very first films, the young actor. And
Amazing.
Jodie Comer is the mom who has some kind of mental problem. We know more details about it later. And he is only 12, I believe, here, but the dad is kind of rushing things. When these kids turn 14 or 15, they have this bar mitzvah, basically this kind of transition into adulthood ceremony in which they go and kill their first infected on the mainland. They live on this island, this incredible visual of this island connected just with this causeway. And I love the world building here. I love the idea of just seeing how they have the three frames on the bridges so that you can line them up so that even when the bridge is partially underwater, you can find your way back just by simply lining up the arches. So I thought like it's very cool the way they have designed this society. And of course, there's only one way in, and it's constantly being monitored for any of these infected trying to cross over. And we discover on this journey with his dad that the infected have evolved to some extent, or at least maybe the virus has, or maybe these creatures have. But I thought this was pretty cool. This idea that, once again, I'm like, are they going to be supernatural zombies? Like, what's going on here? But no, actually, they have started to eat other things. I guess, once they ran out of people to try to eat, they eat other animals. And we see a couple of primarily two different species or subspecies of these infected. One is these grub eating worm like really gross these slow moving zombies, and then who get very fat because I guess it's very easy to hunt when you're just eating worms, so they get very weight. And then of course they're actually the smart ones because the alphas, these others, the very aggressive ones, are very gaunt because they only kill bigger prey, but of course that requires a lot more energy. These feral alphas. And then we learn this mythology of these creatures as well. There's some incredible images, once again, very folk horror, of these alphas like on the horizon as the sun is setting or rising behind them. A very, very cool imagery. What do you think about this whole opening sequence?
Yeah, loved it. Okay, so we're doing full spoilers now.
Yes, we're full spoilers. Full spoilers. I mean,
I
up
really,
until this, I mean, we're only like 10 minutes into the movies. Anybody
that's
who's
right.
listening to this, I'd say that from this point on, just assume that we are just going to continue to walk through the plot.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting seeing the fat zombies and the different kind of zombies. The alphas, I think there's only a couple of alphas. They're the real
Yeah,
big
that's
ones
true.
that have been pumped, or the virus has acted as a steroid for
Steroid?
them, and so
Sure, sure.
everything is pumped up in their bodies. But yeah, I love the world of this town. It feels like
Yes.
they were
Mhm.
cut off from the mainland anyway before the virus, so they still had their own little culture. And now, since the virus, they've just amped up that culture. So it
Yeah.
felt really authentic and really supportive and friendly. And I really enjoyed the way that each person had a role in the village to help them survive, and that's why they've thrived. Aaron Taylor Johnson, I thought sometimes he's a bit over the top for me, but I thought
Yeah.
he was really settling into this film really nicely, and discovering the countryside, and it's all grown over, and it's all just lush and green. It was just delicious. Yeah, I loved this section of the film, and as we talked about last week, you said that Alex Garland has these babes that are born into this world, and then we
Yes.
discover the world through
Literally.
their eyes. Yeah, exactly. Similar themes in this. So I was going with it, and yeah, really enjoyed it. Fantastic. And also the when they finally start killing these zombies, there's this effect. I think did you send me a picture of all these iPhone cameras lined up so they were doing like a
Yes.
Matrix bullet time
Mhm.
effect as the zombies are killed, and it was super effective, and it was really fantastic, and I really liked the kind of digital photography, how it called back to the original film in this kinetic style, but obviously much more hyper real and much more clear with digital technology these days. But yeah, I was on board with this film 100%.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like you mentioned, that the first film is what would people be shooting with? We actually see Jim at one point watching some home videos on this home camera, which is very similar. I mean, slightly upgraded, obviously, but somewhat similar to the footage or the equipment used to shoot that film itself. And of course, here is a modern era. We have iPhones, and so of course we shoot the movie with iPhones. Believe it or not, and some of the imagery is really stunning considering shot on iPhone. And if you haven't seen these behind the scene shots, it's pretty amazing when the zombies are attacking, all the action sequences, especially when the zombies are being struck by arrows or gunfire. They have these cameras on a platform, iPhones, that encircle the actor completely. And then you have this weird effect where as they're being shot, the camera will zip from one iPhone to the other, like bullet time, like in the Matrix. And then, of course, freeze at that moment of impact. So you kind of see like an arrow like going through someone's head. It's pretty gross. A couple of things I thought of while I was watching this. One was the that it maybe this a little bit of a detrimental to the show, to the film itself, because I did think some of this was a little too hyper for my liking. I felt like Danny Boyle has really not had a chance to go hog wild. It seems like in the last few years, he really hasn't gotten a chance to play with all of his toys. And maybe he played with all of his toys now because he had a big budget and he had an opportunity to do so. And some of this worked for me, I would say, very much so. And we'll talk about even some other sequences here in this first section that I thought were remarkable. Some of it not as much. And I did think this was a little, it's almost like they really wanted to do this thing with the iPhone cameras. I'm not sure if it was always effective, is my general opinion.
Interesting. What did you think? So he also cuts in archival
Yes.
footage of
Yes.
old wars or
Yes.
yeah. What did you think of that kind of stuff?
I definitely want to talk to you about that. This is something that
Okay.
bothered me a little also because it's about the thematics of the film, and I'm not sure it all makes sense. Some of these choices really confused me. So I had to do research, by the way, on all of this. So first of all, we heard this in the trailer. We hear Rudyard Kipling reading his own poem Boots from 1919 or something, a very old analog recording, which is pretty famous in England specifically. A lot of the iconography here in this film is very, very, very British, especially when we get to the end, by the way.
Mm.
And this is about the Boer War, by the way. So it's about this war and these soldiers marching their boots in the mud over and over again. It's like mindless war, right? This is like colonialist expansion into Africa 100 years ago. So how that ties into colonialism versus, I mean, it's hard to read this. He's marching with his son into this world. Is this colonialism? I mean, these things want to kill him. So it's a little odd for me, and I do want to explore the ideas there because I'm a little confused. And along those lines, we also get intercut into here the footage, which I didn't know what it was. I just thought it was like thematically overlapping this idea of these archers. So there's, but it's actually from Henry V. So there's a couple of things there. One is, of course, Shakespeare, which is very British, another part of this British history. And then we also have the fact that Henry V, the play, is about the Hundred Years' War, right, against the French. So again, another endless war. So it's interesting that is this a continuation of this never-ending war that Britain has been in? But if they were fighting against another clan, and you're like, why are you guys fighting? You should be working together against these zombies. But the zombies aren't going to kill them if they don't kill them first. So I'm not sure I got the correlation. What did you get from it? All of that.
Yeah, I mean, I just went with the feel of
Yeah.
it, and I thought, yeah, I enjoyed the way that it was interspersed into it, especially the archers. I
Yes.
didn't
Mhm.
realize it was from an old film. Yeah, the archers cut with the modern day archers, and they're obviously extremely skilled because that's the only weapons that they have now. I just went with the feel. It's great that you've done your research, but you still haven't got to
Right.
what it makes sense. I mean, I've heard that the movie is like an allegory for Brexit.
Brexit. Yes.
Yeah, which it didn't really affect me too
Right.
much
Right.
from over here, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. I think they stuffed it up there, but I don't know. I thought the feel of it was fine, and I just went with it.
It obviously, the one thing that's pretty clear, like they're trying to reference, is the idea of the UK. I guess I should have started with this whole thing, which is that the setup for this story is that the UK has been isolated, that they've kind of retconned, removed 28 weeks later from the equation here. It is basically, we go back to 28 days later, that the UK has been infected because it's an island and because it's been quarantined. It was unlikely to spread, which makes perfect sense, by the way. I always thought that was kind of weird, of this idea of like, unless like we saw in 28 weeks later where someone helicopters somebody out. If you know there's a zombie outbreak on the mainland of the UK, it's an island. Like there's no reason to be like, and by the way, especially when you see this thing, people get infected in 20 seconds. Like that's all you have to wait. If there's an infected on a plane or something, you're going to know very quickly. That plane is not going to land in France. That's for damn sure. You're going to shoot it out of the sky, right? So yeah, it seems unlikely that it would spread, unless you have something like 28 weeks later. But of course, they're like, nope, but they contained it. And it's just in the UK again, which is, of course, how Danny Boyle and Alex Garland always wanted it to be. And of course, you have Brexit, right? So you have the UK has separated itself from the mainland, and now it's in this quarantine. So there is that metaphor. I'm not sure how much, how much it pays off thematically with what we're seeing with the rest of the film. So in a way, I feel like you already have this mother, father, and then the emergence of like the spiritual side of something, like that whole journey, a very mythological journey that is laid out here over the course of the film. Do we need to throw the Brexit analogy in there too? Especially because I don't know, like if we read that very plainly, then is the rest of Europe, are those the zombies? Like what is happening when you get off that island? maybe they're better off being isolated to themselves. In this particular
Interesting, yeah.
case, the Brexit is working really well for that island of people. That's what I'm trying to say.
They're thriving, absolutely.
Exactly right. So I mean, if we read it very plainly, maybe they're saying, "Yeah, Brexit." I'm pretty sure that's not what they're saying, but you could read it that way. But then, of course, just some really cool set pieces here when they cross over. We have that interesting moment where they kill that family of these worm-like zombies, but they don't kill the baby, which I think is interesting. Of course, in that moment, the son reacts. The father does put down the arrow, but I mean, that thing's just going to grow up to be another person eating zombies. So I mean, like there's always any one of them left behind is risk. So but it does make you ask that question. And then things get even cooler where, they find this isolated farm. They see this beautiful, these deer or antelope or something. I don't know what is indigenous to that part of the UK, but this herd of them running over the mountains. This, of course, is really beautiful to just imagine. This boy is seeing all this for the first time, this massive expanse of land, all these animals that he does not see. I mean, he sees chickens, like that's pretty much what he sees every single day. He's not used to seeing all these other creatures, other than maybe seeing one when maybe a hunter kills a deer and brings it back, but you don't necessarily see a herd of creatures running over the countryside. So it's like the world is opening up to him. And then we see these more aggressive creatures leading like over the ridge. The son fails to act, and the creatures catch up to them. They go and hide inside this abandoned farm up in the attic. And there's a truly amazing sequence where the house is collapsing around them. And at the same time, the son is having this nightmare, no, not a nightmare, I guess a vision of the herd running past the house in the middle of the night. And all of this is incredibly beautifully photographed.
I agree. Yeah, the night scenes are amazing, and even the where they go from battle in the open fields with the arrows, and then they go to close quarters battle inside the farmhouse with the
Mm-hmm.
arrows. Incredible, amazing action sequence.
Oh, importantly, here they also find a person who's marked with the name Jimmy. Hanging upside down was a person, but now, of course, has been turned into a zombie. And the son fails to act. They escape any kind of transformation, luckily.
And he sees a fire in the distance, and he asks
Yes.
what the
Mm-hmm.
fire is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do love that little flashback there of his father telling him the story of when they were younger. Had he seen this doctor, the last remaining doctor they know of, and how he was pulling all these bodies. It's incredible to see these hundreds and hundreds of bodies laid out in this field. And we find out later on what he was building. And that's where he finds, of course, even in that younger flashback, playing himself.
Mm.
And that night, when the farmhouse collapses, they need to return home. They wait till the water is still high, but just low enough that they can cross. And this alpha that's been kind of stalking them from a distance for a while starts closing the gap on them. And this sequence is incredible.
It's the Tom Cruise alpha run.
He learned how to run from watching. This alphas have a TV somewhere that have like an old Mission Impossible footage running.
That was amazing. And that just aurora or whatever it was in the sky
Yeah.
at night. It was beautiful scene. I mean, I had to kind of suspend my disbelief a little bit for the geological structure of this thin causeway that separates the island from the mainland. But, let's go with it because it's such a cool scene.
And these bats or something that are like surround this creature and then like kind of swarms down on them as he approaches. Really, really cool. Yeah, so this whole sequence ends there. Oh, it actually doesn't end there. I guess it continues. Very interestingly, we see they return. They're at the door. He's shouting out. The guards there take down the alpha with an arrow, a giant arrow through the chest. And then they wait. They wait. They want to see the eyes, make sure that they haven't been attacked. And then they let them in. And then, of course, it's a giant party. They've been waiting for the return. And the dad, this is very interesting thematically also. The dad is now exaggerating how brave his son was. And I think this is another thing that they're trying to explore thematically, this idea of like these macho rituals. And you ask yourself, why did they go to the mainland? He wasn't ready yet. Why is his dad so obsessed with these rituals? And on the one hand, you could say, well, it's just this, it shines very badly on him. We see that he's having an affair, but there's a more generous way to read this, that he is preparing his son for the fact that he's probably going to lose the mother very soon.
The fact that he's not old enough because he doesn't understand what he should be doing. I mean, the whole reason for coming back is being triumphant and giving everybody else hope and giving everybody else a win. If you say, oh, yeah, I killed all these zombies, but the kid didn't. He tried hard, but he ultimately failed, and he's not ready to go out. No one wants to hear that. We want to hear the win. We want to hear that they returned, that they did their mission, that the boy is growing up to become a man, and that everybody is fulfilling their job in this community. But the kid just sees it as lies, and he doesn't believe it himself. So in that way, he's not old enough to be going out there.
I agree, but don't you think it says something about Spike as well? That the boy, I should have mentioned that he's named as Spike. He basically doesn't fit into this version that he's supposed to play, but also the culture itself, right? Because he rejects this by the end of the film. So maybe he is trying to find his way, and he does see himself as an outsider there. I wish they had explained that a little bit more. He does seem to be pretty comfortable in the world as it is. Maybe that's part of the mission too, right? Is that you may very well see, if you watch like Station 11 or something, which is excellent, by the way, if anyone hasn't seen that, a lot of these post-apocalyptic series and stories are about how the younger generation, the older generation, has sacrificed everything to give the kids protection, and then how the younger generations, like, they want to be out in the world, even though it's dangerous, right? Because it's kind of a metaphor for being an adolescent versus being, comfortable and middle-aged and wanting things to be pretty easy peasy day to day, right? There's a very different philosophy, but it seems like he is an outsider in that regard. Maybe the lesson is supposed to be these young people go out and they're like, that's terrifying. I don't want to live in that world.
Mhm.
So I go back to the safety of my community, the Rumspringa for the this Amish enclave, let's say,
Mm.
surrounded by zombies. But
Or the village as
or
well.
the
The
village, yes,
Shyamalan movie.
exactly,
Yeah.
right. Like don't go out outside the village, right? So maybe that's the lesson that's supposed to be learned, but apparently that's not what happens to Spike. Spike wants to go back into this world for multiple reasons.
That's interesting. Yeah, you can see it like that. I just don't think the film gave me enough
It
of
doesn't.
that.
That's
Yeah.
my criticism because if you don't buy that that's the type of person he is, then what happens next
Mm.
makes no sense at all.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, up until this point, I'm really interested in the film. I like this very traditional coming of age story, even that moment of like the collapse of the family when he sees that his mom is at home. He has this conversation with this, I don't know if it's an old friend or a family member who is telling him about how things were when they were younger. And of course, also the fact that that he sees the father with this younger woman, and it's just that moment where you see your parents as flawed individuals. He's becoming a man, right? It's like that first moment of that transition, and a very traditional story, right? Structure, I should say. And so up until this point, this movie is working pretty well for me.
Agree.
And then part two, the mother. A couple of things before we get into the mother here. I wanted to mention or ask, is this more a Danny Boyle movie or is this more an Alex Garland movie?
That's a good question. I'm especially for what happens in the third story. I'm going to say Alex Garland.
Yeah, there's so many things here that are like a supercut of Alex Garland's films. You have, a Civil War analogy or, even military imagery here and the questioning of what the purpose of all that is. You have like Annihilation entering this
Hmm.
weird
Hmm.
natural world where the creatures are being transformed by the world around them. You have, you can like overlay Sunshine, for example, just structure wise on top of this film, and there's a lot of overlap in the beats and the structure of the story. I mean, you could really take over Men, right? You want to talk about like folk horror imagery. You have some of that night slept is sleeping inside of that abandoned church. Definitely imagery we've seen before in Men, and some of those themes as well. A lot of that stuff is recycled, not in a negative way. I mean, I think he is exploring these themes again, but I couldn't help but think that this is more of a Garland film than Danny Boyle, aside from some of the stylistic aspects and maybe the final scene also, arguably. Is that Boyle? Is that his work? So yeah, speaking of these kind of very schematic story structures like Garland often has in his scripts, we have this father sequence, then the mother. And yeah, this is where I first scratched my head. I needed to understand a little bit more how this kid who the night before is having this conversation about how terrified he was and how he didn't act when he needed to and he didn't shoot the arrows when he should have. He would have been dead if his dad wasn't there. He shouldn't have gone. And all of a sudden he's going out with his mother. If he's
Mm.
trying to save his mother and he doesn't think he's up to the task, which according to his own words, he does not think he is. They needed to sell me on, I needed something else to happen here to be convinced that he was willing to take his mom out on this journey.
I just went with it because I just went, okay, well they did that in the previous film. The two kids just left the
Yeah.
quarantine zone to go and search for their
Yeah,
their
and it bothered the hell out
mum
of
or
me
for
then too.
family photos or something. In the
Yes.
first one, oh yeah, we're just going to go out to search for my parents' house. They just go, yep, let's do it. So I just went, all these movies do that, horror movies do that, and I was like, okay, let's just do this. He needs to find the doctor. The doctor can fix his mum. His mum being ill is the cause of all these problems. So, yeah, okay. I wrote it off.
it bothered me, and I did accept
I
it.
can see that. Yeah, I can
I
see it could bother a lot of people for sure.
I did accept it in the fact that, like you said, it's just required for the story to move forward. But I just needed them to sell it to me a little bit more. By the way, if the kid had come back very cocky that he could do this, I would buy it. He's like, you're not trying to help mom. I can do it. And he's just like, you're not ready. And then he finds out that he's not ready. I can buy that too. It's just the fact that having two scenes next to each other where he's like, I'm not ready. And the next one is he's leaving with his mom. I'm like, what
Yeah.
happened in between those two scenes? Like, what is there a missing scene? Like, what happened?
Oh, it was straight away, wasn't it? It was just like,
Right
oh, okay,
away.
this is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it was the very next morning. It's probably a little bit of time has passed, but it is the next scene in the movie. And I'm like, what
Mm,
happened?
mm.
I mean, even if it's been a week, how prepared can he be? I don't know.
Especially when all we've seen of his mum is that she doesn't have very many lucid moments. She's bedridden for most of the time.
She's disoriented. She doesn't know where she is. She thinks the father's there. She later thinks her father's there, but even initially, she thinks that Jamie, the Aaron Taylor Johnson character, is by. And he keeps asking Spike, "Where's your dad? Where's your dad?" So she obviously doesn't know what's going on. If she wanders off, how is he
Mm.
gonna? He can't even protect himself. Not only the fact that they head out, and it's confusing to me the motivation, the idea that once they're out, I know he does say to her that we can't go back because the tide has come in. Sure, I buy that. But the fact that he wouldn't be like, well, let's just go sit on the beach and wait for the tide to change because you're this is not going to pan out well for us.
And
But
I
indeed,
kept
that yeah, go ahead.
waiting for the dad to come
Yes,
and chase them as
right,
well. And
exactly.
and I assumed that was obviously going to happen and he was going to catch up to them at some stage. And I don't think it ever happened.
Like once he leaves, he doesn't go after them, which doesn't make any sense to me either.
Mm,
He would assume that he knows where he's going, right? He's asked about the doctor multiple times. He obviously knows
mm,
where the doctor
exactly.
is. And we know that more than one tide passes because that first night when he's like, well, we can't go back, we'll stay in this church that they find. First of all, beautifully photographed. Once again, these night scenes are really well done.
Mm.
I didn't really love the attack by the slow moving zombie. I kind of thought it was maybe just like a nightmare at first. And I really didn't like the fact, like when someone came and killed the creature in the night, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, is it the doctor or is it somebody else that is protecting them in some way? I'm like, who's this other character? And then it turns out it's the mom who did it in some demented moment. She barely remembers doing it. I'm like, okay, what was that about? That's another head scratcher for me. I mean, it doesn't, not a deal breaker, obviously, but just a strange choice to put in there. Like, not necessary at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I just assumed that dad had finally caught up with them
Right.
and
Mhm.
maybe he
Yeah.
was going to keep him a little bit safe, but then also give the kid agency to
Right.
to actually be fulfilled on his mission. But no.
Yeah. And then it's the mom who sprung to action, and that would have been cool too if like in her dementia she's connecting to something that the movie it could get even more mystical than it does, but that seems to not be the case either by the end. So a lot of this was just strange, like half formed ideas that didn't quite pay off, and this middle section is didn't really work for me, to be honest. Then of course they end up in this shell station hell with the S missing, and
Yeah.
this Swiss army man comes and rescues them by detonating the gas that's in the air, trapped from the gas. I guess the being proximate to the gas supply, and
Very cool
kills all
scene.
these. Yeah, and kills all these zombies there. I'm not sure how they survive all that, but they did. Fine, I'll buy it. I'll buy that. They lay down flat. Good enough. Good enough. The fire does rise. It's true. This was a very cool sequence. A little strange though, and they probably spent a decent amount of money having that action, the military action sequence, where all of a sudden, like, we're completely out of context. Like, what is happening? Is this a flashback? What is going on? Where we see these military men being attacked by the swarm of zombies, and all of them get killed except for this one character, Eric, I think his name is. This is a little cool little reprieve in this section of the story where he's like, "Are you guys crazy?" Like, it's an audience surrogate here, being like, "Yeah, exactly. What are you doing with this crazy lady wandering across the field?" He's just like following them because he literally has no one else to hang out with at this point. All his other army men are dead. But of course, we have to talk about the alpha here. This particular alpha, which looks like Jason Momoa, and he's running around naked with an enormous prosthetic dong, which is just just silly. I mean, I gotta say, this whole thing is so silly. And he likes to pull the heads off of his prey, apparently, and their
It's
spinal
the
columns.
predator move.
And
It's the
Predator, it's
predator move,
true.
isn't
Good
it?
point.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah, and Eric's the one who gives them like the lay of the land, mentioning that the rest of the world is still fully operational. They have iPhones. He's only got 1% left on his battery. The biggest laugh I got in the movie theater, by the way, is when he
Huge,
shows him the
huge
picture
laugh.
and he says, "What's wrong with her face?" What do you mean, what's wrong with her face? So a little commentary
Amazing.
there.
Yeah, the laugh that this got in the cinema is brilliant. It
Huge.
was
It's a
what we
big,
all
the
think.
whole audience erupted into laughter at this one moment. I guess they needed a laugh.
So good.
So we see this, that the rest of the world is operational. Again, some social commentary here that these are the basic things that matter. And we have this shock of understanding not only that, of course, iPhones exist and the internet exists and that his girlfriend's back at home, but I love this whole conversation he has. Like, my friend is doing Uber deliveries and I'm over here. What the hell is wrong with me? And that's the world that these people live in, right?
Poor old Eric. He was such a cool character, and
I
he
liked
he
Eric.
did
Why did they kill him off? I don't understand. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Yeah. I guess he was there. We learned that there is an outside world going along as normal. Yeah, that whole sequence with the mercenary, well, not the mercenaries, they're the protectors, and their boat has crashed, and now they're on the
Yeah.
island, and there's no one on the island, no one out. So he is stuck
Yep.
there.
Yep.
I guess, yeah, he didn't really have anything else to do.
He really doesn't have any way back either. And but that, see, I once again, it's like the script is a little too schematic for me in some of these weird choices. One was the whole night attack, which already bumped me a little bit. Like, do something interesting with that, even if it is the mom who does it, make it matter in some way. It could have been some other person. Like I said, it could have been cool to have somebody else there living in the wild, surviving among the infected, and is in some way protecting them. It could have been the doctor, right, who's watching and protecting them. There you go. Easy thing to do. That would have been interesting. And then Eric, when he showed up, I, again, like you, had this feeling of like, oh, here's interesting to have this kind of outside perspective. Now he's an outsider, but he can be a protector to them too, and he can, give some guidance to this kid. But I guess it's just like another failed parental figure in a way, because he's disposed of so readily, and really just like they just throw his character away. They don't even give him some kind of honorable death. This is a crazy scene, right? The mom is called by one of these zombie ladies who's pregnant. We've seen her pregnant before, and she's giving birth to this baby. It's immaculate conception, I guess, another one of these religious images here. This infected mother has given birth to an uninfected baby. The magic of the placenta, as Ray Fiennes character says later, the doctor, which is true, right? Like, I mean, women are able to not transmit disease to their children through the placenta. Anyway, I'm not sure how this would have happened, but I guess it did. Gives birth to the baby, but this rage-filled mom apparently is able to keep her cool just long enough to give birth to this baby. And but then, of course, the crying baby attracts the alpha. I assume the father, in this regard, kills poor Eric just when he's about to kill them as well. They are rescued by the doctor, who has some super quick acting morphine to knock the guy out temporarily. What'd you think about this whole sequence of events?
This was about the time when I was like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I've been with this film for this whole time. Very
Yeah.
interesting. As soon as we saw the pregnant zombie earlier
Yeah.
on, I was like, oh, she's going to have a baby. And yeah, I think the alpha's supposed to be the father. I don't know. Don't know how that works. Obviously, they have a bit of a sexual appetite as well. Sure. Yeah, birthing the baby, cool scene. But once you're carrying a baby around now, so
Yeah.
now Spike's got his own little family. And then we introduce Ray Fiennes, all painted in red, the Colonel Kurtz
Yes, of
character
course.
at
Yep,
the end of the
course.
river. I was struggling. I was like, okay, I'm struggling now.
Yep.
What's going to happen? And he knocks the alpha out, kinda, but doesn't kill him. Why
Doesn't
wouldn't you
kill
kill
him.
this guy? I mean, come
Hmm.
on.
Yes.
No, very frustrated that they didn't kill the guy then and there.
This
He's
is this is another
obviously
pet peeve of mine. Presumably, he knows that this works, so he's knocked him out before. I mean, the most generous way you can read this is that he wants to try to live among them. And I think your apocalypse now
mm,
metaphor is exactly correct. That's definitely the analogy they're going for there. But even then, it's like I don't understand this like living among the creatures. I mean, I think he accepts the fact that death is part of the cycle. He very much definitely accepts the fact that death is part of this cycle. And when the kid, just jumping slightly ahead, but when the kid rescues him, at that point, it should be like, this guy's head is going onto my pile of heads. It's the last. I mean, that was a little too close this time, right? So
Yeah, I mean, sure, there's the other alphas across the other ridge who can invade that territory if this alpha's gone. Just slit his throat. Just get rid of him. Come on.
exactly. Yeah. So then we have this third section of the film, and of course, this is where the film becomes transcendental or more spiritual. And this again in Garland's films, even like if you think about Men, there's that whole not only the whole weirdness that happens at the end, but even before then, there's that scene where the car crashes and she's outside and she's looking at the sky and it's like she can see the entire Milky Way. So there's always this kind of imagery late. Of course, Sunshine has this as well, very late when you kind of go beyond the physical in a way. And of course, that's what this,
Annihilation.
yeah, of course, Annihilation. Yes, the whole final sequence of Annihilation is incredible. So that's very much in the tone here. This is actually kind of dampened down. It could have gone even more surreal. You can imagine something more drug fueled here in with given Garland's previous films. But in this particular case, we see that there's this bone temple, memento mori, remember death, this kind of beautiful representation of it. But a couple of things here is, first of all, I've heard people who were very, very moved by this whole sequence between the mom and the son, as he has to accept the fact that even after this long journey, there's no way to save the mom. Ironically, by the way, the only thing he could give him is comfort. And this is the same week that they passed in the UK this assisted death law. So it's pretty interesting that a weird coincidence, I guess. I mean, I'm pretty sure this movie was shot almost a year ago. So I'm sure that wasn't intentional, but a very weird correlation there. But what do you think about Jodie Comer's performance? Maybe let's start there.
I thought she was great throughout the film. I haven't seen her in many things, but I think she's fantastic. I think if it had been more drug fueled or more out there, I would have been with it a bit more. My wife
Same.
said as soon as they killed the mum, my wife was out. She was like, "No."
Yeah.
For me, it was just more logistics. I was just thinking about how much effort it takes to
Mm-hmm.
get the flesh off the skull, how much effort it takes to build all these bone structures. Of
Yes.
course, he's had many years to do it, but and
28
then
years.
the whole temple bit. I mean, the kid brushes up against it and the skull falls down. He goes like, "That's
Yeah.
fine." But then when he's got the mum's skull, oh no, now you can climb to the top. Nothing's going to fall. I mean, just from a structural perspective, I couldn't understand how that temple worked. And that brought me out of the film. And just okay, he cleans he kills and cleans the mum and gives him the skull
Mm-hmm.
super quick in the
Yes.
one night, and the kid accepts it all. Yes, he is on a drug as well,
Mm-hmm.
but and then the baby's not crying. The baby's happy to sit there.
Right.
It could have gone way further to sell it a little bit more to me. It just wasn't. I was just thinking too much, and I wasn't on board with it at all. My wife was like, "The mum could have lasted weeks or months more. Why would you have to kill her straight away?" I did like you have to accept death,
Right.
and you also have to accept love in your life. I think
Yes.
that it was a really beautiful sentiment, but it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. None of this makes sense logistically. We did see him. I guess he's got this contraption built so that he's got that fire burning all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is able to clean that Eric's skull very quickly. And there's like kind of some sweet sentiment there where the son's like, "Who was he?" And he's like, "He saved our lives." So there's some nice speechifying here, but I just didn't feel it. Even when the
Mm.
mom passes, and there's that moment between the mom and the son, and when he places the skull, the imagery, the music, beautiful, Young Fathers, by the way, the entire soundtrack done by Young Fathers, which is interesting. A band I do like. Had no idea that Danny Boyle loves this band so much until I just saw very, very recently, finally saw just in preparation for watching 28 years later, T2. I finally saw Train Spotting 2. And there's a lot of Young Fathers on that soundtrack as well. And now he just got them to do the entire soundtrack of this movie, apparently. But the music very interesting. The way that the sunrise and the placement of the skull, all of that visually is really well executed. But like you were saying, I just the logistics of it are really confusing to me because I think to myself, he left the kid there for what, half an hour while he did this, and isn't there still some danger? Like you said, the baby's not crying. And I actually did, once again, in my own mind, I think that's where I psych myself out in some of these moments. I did think the movie was going to go much more psychedelic, especially when the kid was drugged, and that it would be much more of like we saw that really beautiful sequence where he's dreaming and he thinks the deer are running by when it's actually the barn collapsing. I thought it was going to be something more like that, like more symbolic rather than literal. Yeah, he just kind of walks away with her, and then he comes back a little while later. He's like, "Here's her head." Like, what is going on here? So, I was the same thing. I was just continuously thinking about the logistics of the situation.
And Apocalypse Now had that incredible psychedelic scene at the end
Sure.
with Kurtz,
Yes, of
and I
course.
think he was. I thought it was going to go that way, but it just was very. I just didn't feel it.
And especially with the mom having cancer in her brain at this point and was getting demented, that some of this could have been from her perspective and she could have seen something
Mm.
like maybe she would see her dad and her son holding the baby. And you know what I mean? Like there could have been something there while that could have sold this a little bit more. The emotion of it too, it just seemed very weird and abrupt. And once again, plot wise, seemed very sketchy. And when I mean sketchy, I don't mean like I mean like sketched in, like very like a first draft. It didn't feel very developed. It just the film really became more bumpy as it went forward, for sure, for me.
I mean, just the fact that you're hugging your mother,
Yeah.
and then moments later you're holding her skull.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't go with it.
He did make a little Hamlet joke there, which I liked.
He's probably played Hamlet before, Ray Fiennes.
Oh, I'm sure he's done. I mean, Coriolanus, and I mean, trying to think what else. I mean, that he's famously done. But I'm pretty sure he would have done Hamlet at some point. Yeah, and then he takes the baby back home, leaves it behind, hanging on like one of these spikes. Not a great idea, by the way. The baby's crying, and one of the alphas crosses. Well, whatever.
Mm.
That is one of the least logistically confusing things that happens here in the film. And he leaves a note. Of course, gives the baby like this once again this like this death and life balance. Ilsa dies. Ilsa is born. Right. It's like this one for one,
Yeah.
karmic balancing act, and brings her back. They adopt her into this community. They read the note, and he's decided to go out on his own. All right. Before we get to the final scene, I do have a couple other things I want to talk about that just kind of really, these are going to be negative. So I have to say, but like, I'm just going to put it out there that because they did, the giant alphas that are steroidal, like, I never thought I was going to have like body goals from looking at the infected. Like, how many people out there are going to be like, hey, I want to get infected. But you know what? It's a coin toss. I could end up like eating grubs and rolling around on the floor. Like it depends which direction you want to go in, right? But I have to say, the giant prosthetic penis on this thing was actually really annoying to me. To just have it there, just the hint of it, like the first time you see it, you're like, whoa, that's like intimidating, especially since it seems to be operational since he impregnated
Yes.
somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, pretty creepy in that way. But like when he's running after them in the train and stuff, and it's just flopping around everywhere, it's so obviously it's like a prop or something. It's like what is going on here? It starts feeling silly. And by the way, there is some intentional comedy, especially in that sequence. So I start thinking like, how seriously am I supposed to be taking any of this?
It
I was a
became
little
a game of spot it. How could you
yes,
spot it?
yes.
Is he hidden in that shot? Oh, there's a bit in that shot. Let's see.
They
It
could
is
have
comedy.
easily.
Maybe it's intentional.
I
Okay.
think it. No, there definitely is a lot of comedy there. Even like at the peak of that moment when he's about to catch them, and then he gets shot with the the tranquilizer dart and immediately just stops where he is, like within seconds. All of it. And then, they're sitting there and like the doctor's like, we better get out of here, guys. He's not going to be like that for long. There's a lot of comedy, especially in that sequence. We assume the doctor's half mad at this point from being isolated for so long.
There is full frontal nudity in the first film as well with Cillian Murphy's character. So my wife was like, "Oh, there's so much penis in these films." I was like, "Okay, all right." Moving on, was that Cillian Murphy zombie that attacked them?
Oh, yeah, good point. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I forgot to mention that sequence, which also logistically doesn't make sense. He like emerges from this field and then they kill the one. And then there's like 20 of them like right behind, which makes sense that they didn't notice them because they were, in this wheat field. So they didn't notice how close they were. But then they seem to be very far away from them. It's just like, they're conveniently right on top of them when the movie needs it to be. And then half a field away, moments later, even though the mom is trying to run and she's all demented, it just, the logistics of this don't quite make sense. But it's pretty funny. Like you said, it was so central to the promotions to have this creature look so much like Cillian Murphy. And then you really, in the movie as it's presented, you only see it very, very momentarily. So it's hard to even, it's almost like, oh, if I had not seen the trailer and like, of course, the actual photos and the poster and everything, which draws so much attention to that one zombie, I would be like, oh, that zombie kind of looked like maybe like Cillian Murphy, It's very strange, to be honest.
It is strange. Yeah, let's go with the comedy. It's supposed to be hilarious.
I don't think that it's supposed to be Cillian Murphy because supposedly in the third film, if it ever gets made, by the way, we have to talk about that for a moment as well. The third film is supposed to have him as a character. So supposedly we'll catch up with him 28 years later, but we will see. But yeah, let's talk about the final scene here. So then the boy's back on his own. He's become more self-reliant, catches a fish, he's cooking it when these zombies come running up to him. And then what do we have here? We have Jimmy, played by Jack O'Connell, who I always like to see, by the way, just so I'm in Sinners, of course, excellent in Sinners. Here he is playing Jimmy from the beginning of the movie. And here's like the bookend here, setting up the second film. And he is surrounded by his droogs. This is like very Clockwork Orange. Of course, they're dressed up like the Teletubbies, but more importantly, dressed up like Jimmy Savile. So this is something I had to research again afterwards. And apparently this is another thing that's supposed to be that if the world ended in 97, that people never found out about Jimmy Savile, the truth about Savile. So he still is like this, an icon to these young kids who grow up and they dress like him. And that's what we get at the end of the movie. And what did you think about this? Like, it's Power Rangers / Clockwork Orange / Teletubby colors / Jimmy Savile. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? It really did not work for me, to be honest.
I didn't realize it was the same guy from Sinners. I was a big fan of him in that film. So yeah, he's awesome. I want him as the bad guy in every film I see because he's so fun. I love this scene. I'm sorry, I'm going completely against what you say.
That's
because
why
I needed something.
Yes.
I needed some, and it was hilarious. I was laughing out loud. Definite Clockwork Orange vibes and Power Rangers vibes. So funny, and the way that they were flipping and doing all these moves and had all these weapons, so cool. And I think, I just needed something completely different from what I just saw. So I danced out of the cinema after this. I thought it was hilarious.
I see. I think that is the differentiator there because I was bumping up against a lot of things in the film. And then this came and I was like, oh, screw you, movie. But I think if I had thought like, wow, that's great. Like I was like on board with the film's vibe. And by the way, also maybe had bought into the comedy much earlier, then this would have worked better for me. I think I would say. For me, it's like it wasn't until I was like taking notes, being like, I guess this was supposed to be funny earlier, and I hadn't noticed until now. But anyway, that is probably part of where that ending really didn't work for me. But
and
anyway, my review, just to let you know, my Letterboxd review was 2 stars, and it said the Emperor has no clothes and a big dong.
Nice.
But it was a facetious review because I was very mixed on it. But I decided that this is a movie that does not want you to be like, oh, it was okay, which is kind of where I was. And I'm like, this movie wants you to make a decision. So I'm going to be like, no. But I could go either way. Depends on my next viewing. Maybe now that I know what the film is, maybe I won't mind it as much the second time around. Who knows? Who knows?
And I feel like this is a launching pad for the next film, which apparently has already been shot and it's
Yes.
directed by Nia DaCosta, who I feel like I've seen one of her films before. I'm
Candyman.
not
See
quite sure.
Candyman.
Candyman, yes, I did. Yeah. Obviously, the next film is going to be completely different in tone, perhaps more hilarious, and it's going to send us off into different worlds and different themes and different vibes, which I'm cool with.
Darren, I was going to say, did you know that the movie's coming out in January, 28 weeks later?
Oh,
No
that's
joke.
incredible.
No
Yeah,
joke.
that's amazing. Yeah. That's brilliant marketing.
You get to see the sequel 28 weeks later.
That's so cool. If it was 28 days later, it would be even cooler.
That would be amazing. Okay, one more thing to mention here. The movie cost $75 million. The next one's going to cost slightly less. After these tax incentives, it's like 60 million. But let's talk about the 75 million budget. I mean, this film looks great. Does this film look like $75 million? Where did they spend the money?
Yeah, it feels like that's kind of an average cost for a film these days, isn't
Maybe
it?
things are just way expensive now. Maybe that's what it is. Everything's just expensive now, possibly, because it did seem
Yeah.
like it shouldn't have cost that much, But maybe a lot of that is like paying off the rights holders and the cast and yada yada. But
Yeah,
it
the
seems
cast
like,
would.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Ray Fiennes. I mean there's three big name actors in it. So I don't know how much is that 10 mil?
they're not like
Probably
10 million
not.
each though. I can't. No, they're
No,
not. They wouldn't
no.
spend that kind of money on. Aaron Taylor Johnson's never had a hit movie. I mean, he's been in a lot of movies, but he's never been like the name of what was that the Marvel movie he did last year? Craven the Hunter. Did you see that? I didn't
Oh,
see it.
I still haven't seen that. No,
I
I
haven't
haven't
seen it,
seen it.
but I hear it's terrible. But anyway, but like, yeah, he's not a $10 million man.
He's gonna be the new James Bond though, you know that, right?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I have such a mixed opinion on him. I don't find him compelling as a lead character, but when he shows up in a small part, I always really love him. Like when he showed up in Tenet at the end, I was like, oh, he was great in that. But it's like it really is. It's really all over the place for me as far as like I don't know. And here too, he just wasn't. I don't know. Like he worked as the dad, and of course he's really not. Turns out to not be the protagonist, although he seems to be when you start watching the film. Oh, that's going to be my protagonist. It's like nope. Turns out it's the boy, but he's not. He looks the part, but he doesn't quite. It's not. Doesn't grip me. He's not. Doesn't have that charisma to pull me in.
And he's in the next one, I think.
I believe so. I mean, he has to, right? At some point, he's got to reunite with his dad, I would assume. And the last part of this, of course, because they spent all this money on this movie and it's a big release, the box office is in now. It's made $30 million in the US, 30 million overseas, exactly 30 on both. And that is slightly bigger than Furiosa did. Not at all what they thought with early tracking. It seemed like that early tracking, the early ticket sales, the trailer views that dropped off after that inertial splash, that it must have a huge cult following, but that might be it for this film. And like I said, it opened slightly bigger than Furiosa and slightly smaller than Furiosa overseas. And Furiosa only made like $150 million, which, by the way, given the budget here, would be better than break even. But are they going to make enough money? I mean, is the second one going to break even? Are they going to make a third one? Like, what's going to happen? So are you looking forward to the Boner Temple?
Interesting. The Boner Temple, yes. Well, my wife's out. She's like, no, don't want to see any more of those. I'm done. Yeah, of course I am. Absolutely. I want to see this story continue. I want to see Jimmy. I
Yeah.
got to see what Jimmy's all about. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, as much as I butted
right.
up against that scene at the end, as much as I disliked the scene itself, I do want to see O'Connor be this villain who is hiding as a hero. And once again, Alex Garland, very briefly, Danny Boyle asked him, what are these movies about? And he said, the first movie is about family. The second movie is about the nature of evil. So I'm curious about that for sure. And his representation of evil hiding in plain sight, or like, let's say, a wolf in sheep's clothing. All of that is, I guess that's the a Jimmy Savile correlation as well. I guess that is intriguing. I don't know if people are going to turn up, though. I have a feeling that general audiences are not going to be okay with this movie. So we'll have to see next week how
Yeah,
precipitous the
yeah.
box office drop off is from week 1 to week 2. And then that might decide whether we see a third one. I mean, we're definitely going to see a second one, right? But the third one, question.
Interesting. Well, I think it's good that general audiences aren't going to be cool with it because that's what makes interesting movies. I think if everyone's happy with it, then it's like, it's not super interesting to talk about.
Right.
But yeah, the fact that the next one's called The Bone Temple means we're going to see more of the Doctor
Sure.
creating his little sculptures, which wasn't my favorite part.
Right. To your point of the box office success, I really don't mind either. I just bring it up because, I mean, I think the plan was to set the table with these first 2 films. And then the reason they didn't greenlight a third one automatically was they needed a lot of money for the third film. And if they want to spend $100 million on the third film and the first 2 don't make money, that's the only reason I bring up the box office. If these movies cost $30 million a piece, then hey, if they
Yes.
make 50 or 80 million and they become cult hits at home video, then yeah, they'll make enough money to make a third film. But if they need $100 million, where is this money going to come from? Because this movie needs to be huge for that to pan out. And I'm not
Yep.
sure they made a film that will attract a general audience. Maybe you make the more traditional movie I was describing, or we saw in the first section of this film, expand that to be film number 1, and then get as weird as you want when you get this is film number 3. But don't burn your goodwill with your general audience in the first movie when you're planning 3 of them. That's my general opinion on that.
Yep, makes a lot of sense.
We unfortunately do not have time to break down Garland's career, but I'd love to. Maybe we'll do that as a side conversation in a future episode.
Or Danny Boyle's career, either.
That's what I meant to say. I don't know. Did I say Alex Garland? I did break down Alex Garland's career, but I would like to do Boyle's career. Anyway, we will try to find time for that at some point in the future.
Yeah, there's a few that I haven't seen actually, some of his more recent ones, but yeah, there's absolute classics in there for sure.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I definitely want to talk about Sunshine, which I love. T2, which I just saw recently, which I mean, I won't spoil my opinion of it. I thought, I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was not Train Spotting, which I think is intentional, which is interesting. Oh man, but I got to talk to you about Yesterday. Holy cow, that movie.
I don't think I've seen T2. I've seen Yesterday. I've
I
seen
just
Battle
saw
of the
T2.
Sexes.
I love Train Spotting. Had seen Train Spotting so many times, and I only saw T2 this week in preparation for this conversation. So pretty crazy. And Yesterday. Oh boy. Oh boy.
That one of them that I love and that I can watch is 127 hours. I've read
Yes.
the book,
Really good
incredible
one.
book,
Yep. Yep.
incredible film. I can watch it any time. It's so good.
That's a great one. Yeah. And I think that that's a film that on paper makes no sense that even made it. And it's riveting. It's fantastic. So, yeah. Interesting filmography, to say the least. Oh, and Trance. Did you ever see Trance?
I did see Trance. Yes. Talk about full frontal nudity.
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Oh, my God. In close up. A very memorable seeing that on the widescreen. I'm like, oh, my God.
Wow.
Seeing that in the theater on a date, no less. I'm like, wow. Is it getting hot
Yeah.
here?
How did that date go?
I went pretty well, I got to say.
Yeah.
But Trance is an interesting. I find that film movie's pretty bad, but I find the filmmaking so good that it's like Danny Boyle at his best. It is from moment to moment utterly like you're transfixed, you are entranced because the filmmaking is so good. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh, okay, that's what that was all about. But it's really incredibly well made until you find out what the story is about, and you're like, oh, that for this? Okay, all right. But it does show you what he can do just with style. But that's definitely style over substance for sure. But
Oh, he's so
I enjoy it.
stylish.
I enjoy it.
Yep, I'm down. Anything Danny Boyle does for sure.
All right, Darren, thank you again for the conversation. And we will pick it up next week with Smoke, episodes 1 and 2.
Okay, Smoke. So when is it coming out? You got to remind me.
Oh, Fridays. It's their Friday release schedule. We'll still record on Sundays, I think.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
All right, and well see. Is it going to be a
All
Dope
right.
Thief again, or is it going to be?
Ooh.
We'll see how
see.
long we last with it. So. All right, Darren, thanks again.
All right. Thanks so much, Victor. Bye.
Thanks.